The first topic is transphobes accuse Patsy Stevenson of being a crisis actor, which is, if you don't know, Patsy Stevenson is the woman who is in the thumbnail. She's been in all the papers recently, online, etc. But to understand what the deal with her is, we have to go back, specifically to the 3rd of March, with the disappearance of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard was a 33-year-old woman who disappeared in South London on the 3rd of March 2021. Her body was then later found in Ashford, Kent on the 10th of March. Now, Wayne Cosenz, a Metropolitan Police officer with the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Unit, had been arrested on the 9th under suspicion of her kidnapping and later her murder, and was formally charged on the 12th. He appeared before Westminster Magistrates Court on the 13th, along with another, and is going to have another hearing on the 16th. Had another hearing on the 16th. The provisional trial is set for the 25th of October 2021 and is expected to last 4 weeks. So there's a lot to unpack here. The fact that it was a woman who went missing, the fact that it was a police officer who seemingly kidnapped and murdered her. So rather naturally, there were a lot of people who were angered by this. Sarah Everard came from a very specific economic and ethnic background. She is white, upper class, upper middle class, so she gained a lot of media attention in that regard. So what happened is, following Cosenz being formally charged, a vigil was planned to be held in Clapham Common on the 13th of March. Now, this was originally organised by the organisation Reclaim These Streets. However, after a judge ruled that the vigil could not go ahead, the Reclaim These Streets decided to back down, and in their place, another organisation, Sisters Uncut, an organisation that was created originally to stop the defunding of domestic violence services by the Tory government. They stepped forward and took over and went ahead with the vigil. Now, the police knew that a large number of people planned to continue with the vigil even after the judge had made the order, and they promised Mayor Khan of London that they would handle the situation carefully. So it seemed like the vigil was going to be allowed to go ahead. They were just going to be there, observe, etc. People were going to go home, and that would be that. That did not happen. Now, according to a first-hand account by journalist Michelle Fiel, everyone was wearing masks. They were practicing social distancing. Like, you could see distinct groups of people who would arrive together, so they were clearly family or close friends. They were generally trying to avoid other people. They're trying to stay as far apart as possible. They were just there to mourn Sarah and talk about violence against women, especially when carried out or accommodated by the police, because in spite of the fact that this is really the case that blew up, this is by no means the first instance. It was noted very quickly that the police has a history of doing this sort of thing. They have a big culture developed around this, which we'll come to discuss in a second, particularly violence targeted towards sex workers, women of colour, trans people. So people were quick to point out that this goes beyond Sarah. It's a sad fact that, like, Sarah dying as a almost a what's the word I'm looking for? She being a white middle class woman, she was the milk carton girl in this instance. And whilst it's sad that it took that to bring everyone together to discuss this, at least that's happening. So Sisters Uncut was having a number of speakers talk about various different issues in various different communities, and things seemed to be going normally. The vigil had already started whilst the sun was up, and the police did nothing. They kept their positions at the side of the event. However, over the coming hours, Michelle noted how they started moving closer and closer, which made the people in the crowd move closer and closer, packing them in. That was until around 7 p.m. once it got dark, where the police rushed into the crowd, goose-stepping all over the flowers that had been laid down as part of the vigil, and arrested 4 individuals. Now, one of those individuals was Patsy Stevenson, who was forced to the ground, as the picture shows. What the picture doesn't show is that after she was forced to the ground, they literally ripped off her mask, increasing the likelihood of exposure to the virus. She and the other 3 women were then dragged off into the dark by police, as other police made sure that nobody present could follow them. There was a lot of screaming, there was a lot of commotion. If you watch the videos, it is really quite terrifying. According to Patsy Stevenson, literally all they did is drag them to the van, force them in the van, and tell them, okay, we'll let you go in a second, but we need you to pay a fine. That is all they did. So that has to make one question, why were they arrested? If you want to give a fine, you can just give a person a fine. You don't actually need to arrest them. Quite clearly, this is a terror tactic. This was a display of terror. This was intended to induce fear. It was intended to make the people present feel like, hey, if you want to protest police violence, particularly against women, we can put an end to that. It was no coincidence that they waited until night to drag away 4 women into the dark at a vigil about a policeman kidnapping and murdering a woman. You know, that's no accident. And the fact that they didn't even like process the person, like take them down to the station, etc. The fact that they literally pushed her into the back of the van and suddenly switched tactic. The moment they were out of public eye, the moment that the fear factor was gone, they then like, okay, we'll give you a fine, you can go. That's quite clear in what they were doing. They were there to terrify the people who were present. And part of the reason is, one of the other things that were being discussed there is the recent police crime sentencing and courts bill. Now, you might have heard about this, you might not have, but what this bill would do, besides criminalizing various ethnic groups, I believe the Romani are being targeted in the bill as well, it also includes it includes an entry which, under reasons for arrest in relation to protest, includes for causing a nuisance. So quite literally, it is criminalizing protest under the grounds that it causes nuisance. So, quite clearly, Citizen Cut is very worried about this setting a precedent, this passing through law, because how then can you protest police brutality at all if they can just arrest you for causing a nuisance, which is a very bullshit term, by the way. It's very open. You know, it just creates a total police state. I mean, the British police, with what we've seen in relation to Black Lives Matter and the Extinction event, they already have way too much power. They are already too violent. This just hands them more power. So again, that was part of the conversation, that was part of the fear. Since this happened, there's actually been another protest, I believe it was in Brighton, or it might have been Birmingham, I can't remember which one, and the police just turned up in full riot gear, began assaulting people, began attacking the press. All of the hallmarks of the stuff that we've been seeing in the US following the Black Lives Matter protest, they've been doing as well. So, you know, the police right now in the UK are at a very unstable position, because people, like the general public, is starting to withdraw consent as to their policing, and that is not making them happy. They are fucking terrified of that. Now, I know one of the arguments people will make in response to this is, oh, but like there's a pandemic going on, you shouldn't be out there protesting or holding a vigil. First of all, the pandemic does not care about violence against women. It's not a convenient virus. It doesn't pick, oh, this is a bad time for you, okay, we'll go away. It also doesn't care about the fact that fascism is trying to pass a bill into law that would criminalize protest as a nuisance, under the guise of being a nuisance, okay? If you want to get angry at anyone for timing, get angry at the fucking police for trying to pass such a bill at a time where people can't protest. They are seizing the right to protest at a time where people are trying to use the pandemic as an argument as to why people shouldn't protest. You know, it really is a disgusting display of priorities. You know, we saw this with the Black Lives Matter. Oh, well, the Black Lives Matter protest is going to lead to, you know, a explosion in, you know, COVID disease, etc. And it's like, yeah, but the thing is, police aren't going to stop shooting people. You know, it is disgusting to use the presence of, you know, the ongoing pandemic to try and say, oh, well, you marginalized people, disempowered people, you just need to put up with this shit, and you need to allow a fascist government to criminalize protest. And here's the thing, as mentioned earlier, I mentioned the fact that she was wearing a mask when she went down, and they tore the mask off. If they were really worried about preventing the spread of the COVID virus, they wouldn't have slowly boxed the group in. They wouldn't have grabbed people, taken their masks off, shut them in locked vehicles. If they were really concerned about the virus, they wouldn't be doing any of these things. And we've been shown recently, there was a football riot elsewhere in the country that went ahead. There have been protests over things like free speech. Those go ahead, like free speech as in by fascists. You know, those protests seem to go ahead absolutely fine, since they're not targeting the police, since they're not calling the police into question. Okay. No, the bill is against all protests. It gives police the right to classify anything they want as a nuisance and to put an end to it. Also, one other thing that people might mention is the fact that the court had ruled this vigil should not go ahead. People should have listened. Anyone who went there, it's their own fault, etc. The problem is, the court system is part of the same institution as the policing system. There is a vested interest there in, like, scratching each other's backs. So why you would expect the court to be okay with a vigil that could potentially lead to repercussions for the policing system, I don't know. They were going to cover them because it's all part of the same canteen culture. For those who don't know what canteen culture is a sociological term that specifically discusses the way in which UK police protect themselves. They house conservative views in relation to sex, race, ethnicity, sexuality, etc. It describes the way in which, as new police come in, they're all vetted, they're all groomed, if you will, and they're all checked over to make sure that they won't rock the boat. That, if they see a fellow officer being racist towards someone in the street, they will have the officer's back. They will lie in protection of that officer. This is a marked phenomenon. We've known about it since, you know, the 60s, the 70s. It's been a recorded part of social science. We know it exists. Sadly, because the only way to get to the top of the policing ladder is to go through the lower levels where canteen culture is most seen, everyone in the system is infected with it. The only way to get rid of canteen culture is to completely strip out everything and come up with some different method of supporting community and keeping them safe. You cannot fix the UK police force. Sociology has known this for a long time. Yeah. And the court system is sadly a part of that. They all work to do the same thing, and yeah, it's really just a big fucking mess at this point. So, as mentioned, Patsy Stevenson was one of the people who was arrested. Now, it should be noted, actually, sorry, I should go back to the bill. The bill mentioned earlier, thankfully, that has been postponed. Due to the protests, The bill is no longer passing through. In spite of the fact that it made it through the first stage of voting, it is no longer going through the committee that was compiling the final version. It has been stopped for now. And this resulted in a spokesperson for Sisters Uncut to state the following, quote, the last week has shown that protest works. That's why they want to ban it, and that's why we're fighting back. They also added, quote, policing by consent is a story this country likes to tell about itself. The reality is that policing is unacceptable, aggressive, and violent. Targets of police repression, working class people, racial minorities, sex workers, and many more have had enough, end quote. There have been subsequent protests and vigils since then, both at Clapham Common and Scotland Yard, which is where the Met Police are stationed. There were also calls for Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick to resign, something she has refused to do. And yes, in spite of the fact that she is a woman, she's still part of that canteen culture. No, it doesn't resolve anything. I should also note that the mayor, who again was told beforehand that they would handle things responsibly and respectfully, was incredibly furious, publicly furious at the police force for this. So really they have very few allies at this point. And again, thankfully the bill has been stopped. It is not dead, so it may still be passed, but at least it means we will have more time to organise in the UK and potentially fight a fascist state. So, with all of this going on, all of this, and I know that was a lot to take in there, with all of this going on, I am absolutely sure that the gender-critical crowd had some wonderful takes. And of course they did. Notably, a very popular gender-critical account, the Fat Controller, that's at It's Joel Gardner, a gender-critical account with over 23,000 followers. So again, this is not a small account. Tweeted out an image of a Casting Now profile of the aforementioned Patsy Stevenson, stating that, quote, "She looks to be another crisis actor. I fear the death of a woman has been usurped to push this sinister cultural Marxist agenda even further, in the same way the tragic death of George Floyd was. A 6 p.m. curfew is not the solution and will destroy society further." End quote. A sentiment that is being spread elsewhere. Now, the reason this was done is because Patsy, in an interview, had stated the following, quote, "I came here to support all women, whether it be cis women, trans women, every woman who cannot walk down the street by themselves because of men." End quote. It should also be noted that Sisters Uncut is a famously inclusive movement that includes trans people. So the fact that trans-inclusive people are doing shit to try and protect women everywhere, of course that means the gender-critical crowd has to come out and instantly attack them because they just can't handle the fact that, hey, maybe we're not on the right side. Now, there is a lot to unpack with that original tweet by the Fat Controller. First of all, let's start with the legitimacy of the profile, because again, there was a Casting Now profile, which is an acting site where you can like search for people that you want, hire them if they have certain skills, etc. So they shared an image of Patsy Stevenson apparently being on that site. Is that legitimate? Yes. Patsy Stevenson is an extra actor, a dancer, a performer. Funnily enough, being a female actor, and we're not even talking like a Hollywood actor, big-time actor, which doesn't resolve situations as the Me Too movement has shown, but being a small-time extra actor doesn't make you immune to violence against women. But there's this whole idea of, well, she's an actor, therefore she must be a crisis actor. No. I mean, first of all, let's pretend like for a moment that was the case, that she was a crisis actor. Wouldn't the cabal behind this, and we'll come back to the anti-Semitism in a second, wouldn't the conspirators behind this make sure that the person they picked to be a crisis actor didn't have a social media presence as an actor. But of course, reason goes out the window when it comes to bigotry. It's all got to feed the agenda. The trans agenda, yeah, of course. It's got to be the trans agenda. And let's move on to the whole...
I'm putting you in the bin. Putting you in the bin.
But of course, like, a lot of these terms, cultural Marxism, globalist, Hollywood elite, even like the homosexual agenda as originally, and now the trans agenda, all of these are wrapped up in the idea that there is some nefarious force working behind the screen to like control the world. And a lot of these points are based in anti-Semitism. Cultural Marxism, as we've seen, has been used by the alt-right. It just means the Jews. That's literally what it means. There is the gender-critical anti-Semitism profile on Twitter, which covers all this. They always go after, like, oh, this billionaire is supportive of trans people, and look, that, you know, Echo, which is the forgotten what they're called. What are the things that used to create Echo?
Brackets, parentheses.
3 brackets or parentheses around it. You know, it's always this anti-Semitic conspiracy. We covered it before on the channel. They're constantly hammering away that trans people are a Jewish conspiracy. And so, you know, there's that. But then on top of that, she decided to go ahead and link things to the Black Lives Movement. And, you know, everything that happened there with the death of George Floyd, which just drags in a bunch of racism as well, because now, no longer do black people have autonomy. Now they are all just the puppets, the dancing monkeys for the Jewish conspiracy. And, you know, this, it really does just continue to pile up. You know, I mentioned in a recent video of, oh, scratch a transphobe, find a fascist, and it's like, this transphobe couldn't just leave actual feminists fighting to protect women without dragging out anti-Semitism, racism, you know, and it is just fucking, oh. And the fucking
I can't help but think, like, the whole point of fascism is you're meant to hide your power level.
Mm-hmm.
Not put a giant neon sign over yourself saying, yes, this is all connected.
Yeah. And it's like, and this really fucking scary thing is, this narrative is working. I know it is, and I've got to get personal here. Anyone who was on my Discord knows that I've... actually, I don't know if I told anyone else that I'd done that. But anyway, people on Discord might remember the fact that my brother recently joined our Discord. He found it through his own means. He joined my Discord, only to very, very shortly banned by me. And like, you might think, well, why is he no longer part of the Discord? Why did you ban him? Are you that cold, Ethel? I banned him because when I posted about the fact that, you know, this police violence was not fucking okay, that it's not okay to drag women kicking and screaming away in the night as they are there for a vigil about a woman who was kidnapped and murdered by a police officer, he threw out that conspiracy. This is someone I have never considered a fascist, decided to throw out, hey, didn't you know she's a crisis actor? And it's just like, at that point, I just fucking gave up because, you know, I tried to reason, I tried to point out the fact that this was a fucking neo-Nazi talking point and he needs to think about where the fuck he is getting his news from. But no, that's how it is. It is pervasive. It's not just isolated to this one ranting Twitter account. That Twitter account has 23,000 followers, okay? And they will have connections of their own, and it grows exponentially, okay? And he may not have got it from there, but he got it from somewhere. And it is just grounded in anti-Semitism, it's grounded in transphobia, in racism, and, you know, it's really fucking horrific, because I wasn't even sure if you were going to cover this, because it was just like, oh, it's just one Twitter user. And it's just like, no, it's literally making its way, and like I am getting the same fucking arguments from people completely distinct from them. To answer, are crisis actors even real? No, they are not real. It's complete bullshit. It is conspiracy theorists talking about them, going on about how, like, school shootings, you know, they're all crisis actors, or the people who died in some, you know, usually imperialistic bombing, oh, they were all actors as well. This is fake footage, like propaganda put out by the enemy of the United States of America. But no, sadly, it's become a staple of far-right like rhetoric, and it's pervasive. It's all over the place. So yeah. Just having a look to what do my notes say. I've done the legitimacy of profile. Yeah, I think I've actually covered most of the things, unless there's anything in particular you'd like to add.
I remember thinking about when you said the thing about like the virus doesn't care about violence against women.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very interesting where the agency lies there. The people who are committing the violence have agency,
yeah,
but they're not held accountable. And instead, it's people who have violence committed against them who are made responsible
mm-hmm.
for the impact of this virus. It's the same argument throughout abuse culture, where, you know, the abuser is always treated like this non-human natural disaster you have to plan around, and
Mm-hmm.
the victims are told, you can't do this, you can't do that, or you have to do these things. It's very interesting. Of course, when people did the anti-masker protests,
Mm-hmm.
no one says a fucking word.
Yes, that's fine. Or when
that's
it's a
fine, even
game,
though what they're protesting is like a temporary thing, and they're not being hurt. It's just pandemic measures. But when people are protesting actual violence, actual deaths,
mm-hmm.
that has to be shut down immediately. And it shows that it has nothing to do with the risks because of the pandemic.
Domestic violence has risen during the pandemic, and, you know, pretending, oh, well, it can wait. No, it can't wait. It never should have waited. The fact that it's gone this long without being addressed thoroughly is a fucking disgrace that we all have to live and bear with, excluding the people from like various communities who have been on the ball in tackling this sort of thing.
I'll tell you something else. From day one of the pandemic, domestic violence has not only like increased in the amount of people who are experiencing it, but the ones who already experience it,
mm-hmm.
you know, they've been burdened a lot more.
They can't get out. They can't
because
even.
They can't even
go.
Out.
They can't go to the shops like as often to like get away safely. Just have that respite. You know.
I nearly made a video about this. Like, that's the thing that really hit me when the pandemic first hit. Was I'm stuck with an abusive person 24/7, and I'm very, very lucky in that we only had to isolate for about like 2.5, 3 months, but it took its toll. And the people who had been dealing with this for over a year, I don't even know how they managed.
Yeah, and it's just the idea that like people who are suffering violence just need to shut up, like put up with it. It's just absolutely disgusting. Never any question about like what the police could have done to de-escalate the risk posed. It's all about, hey, you shouldn't have gone here. Even though, as journalists going there noted, they were wearing masks. They were trying to keep a distance, because here's the thing. People don't want to die of the virus anymore. They want to die by being kidnapped and murdered by police, you know. But the thing is, one is something more pressing that they can fight. Like, you can't debate a virus, okay? they can take all the measures they can to try and make them safe, okay? But the thing is, the police are still going to come killing them. So, yeah.
Here's another thing: a virus isn't going to fucking circumvent the measures you put in place. You know, with fighting human violence, that is. Sorry, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm very tired.
If you really want to blame someone, blame the people who are trying to pass a law criminalizing protest during a pandemic.
Right, yeah, sorry, no. I remember where that fragment of thought came from. Like, they're masking, they're trying to keep socially distanced. It's not like they're going to need to do things on top of that, because the virus is not going to deliberately try and circumvent those measures in the most efficient way possible, the way police do for these sorts of things. So the fact that they are following the advice should be enough.
Yeah. Like, it shows that these aren't people out there like, oh, I don't believe the virus is a problem. No, they believe the virus is a problem. They've decided that, like, the police are a more pressing matter.